Welcome to the next in my series of learning to paint on plein air. I'm from Northern Ireland, but I live in the south of Spain. My aim is not only to improve at painting from life on location, but to share some of the beauty of Andalusia with you. Although I've worked as a professional artist since 2008, all my time is spent creating in my studio. It's been a lifelong ambition to have these painting adventures, and that's the journey I hope to take you on with me. Because it's June and quite hot here at the moment, I thought I would be clever and retreat to the forest for some cooler temperatures. And thankfully, the clouds that gave me some cover on my walk here started to move on for the afternoon, leaving me with exactly the sort of light and shade that I love to paint. So I think this is going to be my spot for the afternoon. I've got a lovely big tree here for a bit of natural shade. I really like the little scene just behind me, this little part of the path with some nice big trees, although I could have stopped at several different points along the way. Just before I get set up, I want to thank absolutely everyone who watched my first video in this plein air adventure series. You've really spurred me on with all of your kind comments to keep filming these adventures and to share this journey into plein air with you. But let's get my stuff set up and make a start. Just like last time, I've got my lovely Julian French easel. I will link to this in the description below. They do also come in a smaller size than this, which would be easier for carrying, but I just feel like it's worth the effort because it's so lovely and sturdy to work on. And then mounted on that, I've got my art folder, which doubles up as a drawing board and is also quite handy for transporting the finished work home. So I've brought along my pastels in my travel trays. These all click together and they're very handy for transporting the pastels, but it's not so nice once I get here to actually lay out my palette, so I'm just going to decant all of my pastels into a larger tray just at the front of my easel. I am on the search for a nice pastel tray that I can bring with me that has all of my pastels nicely displayed, so that's something that I'm going to upgrade to very soon. But for the time being, this is absolutely fine, and I'm just going to quickly lay out all of the pastels I've brought with me. My main concern today is for the insects that are attacking me even before I've made a start. Perhaps this is a word that we use in Ireland, but there is a big fly that we refer to as a clag, and they are nasty, nasty flies. They bite you and it really hurts. Not quite as bad as a bee sting or a wasp sting because it doesn't continue hurting for very long, but boy, it hurts at the time. So I don't know if this is actually going to be a good idea or not. I brought quite a limited palette of colours with me, which is fine, but this is definitely something I'm going to look into upgrading, some way of bringing a bigger collection of colours and have them nicely displayed. But here is my homemade viewfinder about to be put to good use. You can see I've got the center point marked with some string, which I have also marked on my pastel paper. So I'm gonna see if I can get myself a little composition drawn out on my pastel paper using my trusty viewfinder. Just like last time, this thing is invaluable, and like last time I'm also going to use a harder pastel stick. This is just a brown colour of pastel stick, something that's good for sketching with basically. Just before I started, I made a few adjustments on my easel just to bring the paper up to a better height, and then I'm basically using this little viewfinder to choose my composition. It really helps me to crop the scene in front of me and not get so overwhelmed with everything I can see in my peripherals. So I find this a really useful tool just to help me choose the composition initially. But I've got to say the most overwhelming part of this experience was the insect bites from those terrible, terrible clags or horseflies. And you can see here I just abandoned drawing for a moment to go and have a drink and to swat some flies for a moment. But back to it, I decided to persevere. As annoying as the flies were, I was convinced that they would get used to my presence and that I would get some peace at some point in the day to work on this. So trees are something that I want to practice. That's one of the reasons I also came into the forest, not just to get away from the sunshine. And in this little scene we've got a lot of pine trees, and we've also got a cork oak tree, which is something that you find quite a lot in Spain, and they're really interesting, gnarly looking trees, very, very interesting to paint. But trees are always something that I feel I need to practice more of, and a wider variety of types of trees. But you can see at this point I've kind of stopped using the viewfinder now. Once I crop the composition, once I know where the edges of it are going to be, I don't need to continue using the viewfinder, but it certainly does help me get started. So now I'm just coming in a little bit heavier with my marks. I've sketched very lightly to begin with, and then as I become more sure of the things I want to include, I can lean a little bit heavier with the harder pastel stick. All of this will get covered over in the painting process, but I do feel a lot more confident starting with a bit of a line drawing. It doesn't have to be very detailed, but I do like taking this opportunity to just figure out the perspective and the proportions of everything just before I start to lay down some colour. Now at this point, Django and Lola have been running about the forest like lunatics, and they head off home now with my partner for a while, leaving me alone in the forest to work for a couple of hours. So it's time to start the colour work, and I've time-lapsed all of this just to give you a quick rundown of my painting process throughout the day, and I'll try and talk you through some of my thought process when doing something like this. I try to start with some darker values and do a bit of blocking in. I'm using the pastel sticks mostly on their sides, and I tend to have a selection of colours that I really like to pick up when I am depicting light and shade. You'll notice that I use quite a lot of purple. I really love the combination of purple and green, and I always seem to find a good excuse to throw lots of purple in most things. For the base colour on the trees, I'm using one of my dark Terry Ludwig's. This is their very well liked and well known colour, an eggplant colour. It's V100 if you're interested. And I really love using that as the base colour for the trees. It's super rich and dark, but I like to try and avoid using any pure black in my landscapes. So it's a really good black alternative. It's super dark, but without feeling quite as flat as pure black. So I try to make broad marks
I'm not thinking of detail at this point. I'm basically just trying to get most of the paper covered with a base layer. And I'm trying to look at it almost by squinting a little bit at the landscape. Helps me to not hone in on anything too detailed at this stage. But once I get a bit of colour pretty much all over, I'll then take a little sponge, as you see here, and I just give all of that a bit of a rub into the paper. It kind of smudges everything, starts to mix everything, and it turns it into a little bit of a mess, really, which is kind of what I want. I just want the general colours and values. And what it also does is knocks a little bit of the excess pastel pigment off the paper, kind of sets my underpainting, and then I can start to come in and work either some details or just continue blocking in some lighter values over the top of what I have done. So here you can see me just starting to pick out some lighter colours on the path, just finding some of the dappled sunlight that's shining through the trees. So as well as thinking about some details now, I'm also thinking about the lighter values that I want to bring in on top of this. I'll also start to cut through some of the branches and the trees to find some light that's coming through from the sky. Now, the main issue that I had with this piece was the top of the painting, really, in between all of the branches that are a bit closer to us. And I'll mention this towards the end of the video, but I felt like I didn't get the values nicely behind the trees here. So in the distance, I think I should have come in with some lighter values back there. So in between the trees and the distance, I think it would have helped if I had used some lighter values just to give us the feeling of distance and to make these darker trees closer to us stand out a bit more. But if I'm honest, this day was quite torturous, as the whole time I'm painting here, I am also being bitten by those dreaded horseflies. They really didn't leave me alone at all, and it made this process so much more difficult. I really couldn't focus completely. Perhaps I wouldn't have done much better if I had been able to focus, but it certainly played a part in my painting process. And there were lots of moments of me dancing around and a few moments of shouting at them. Thankfully, I'm far away from anyone else, so no one could hear me, hopefully. But it certainly was a frustrating part of the day. But nevertheless, I actually really did enjoy this, and I am enjoying getting out into nature. I already spend quite a lot of time in nature. I walk a lot with the dogs. This forest is an area that I come to all the time with the dogs already. But I am really enjoying taking my art materials outside and having this experience. I learn something new every time, and hopefully I'm beginning to develop a different way of seeing and painting to how I normally work, from photo references back in my studio.
Well, I'm gonna call it a day. As you can see, the sunshine has come around and it's now shining directly on me, and it is too hot for that. Also, that seems to have attracted those big flies even more, and they're biting me so much right now, although they've been biting me all day. So that's one of the things that you might have to deal with when you're working outside. There's a very romantic notion of what it is to work outside, but there are also some difficulties as well, and this has been a good example of that. But despite all of the distractions, I'm reasonably pleased with the little colour study that I made today. I really enjoyed the spot that I chose to paint despite the insects. And I think this is something that I could definitely make use of in my studio if I was working on a bigger piece. But I think I'm gonna pack up and go home, and I'll do the outro from the comforts of my lovely, cool, insect-free studio. Come on, let's go. Come on, let's go. Stop.
It's the next day and I'm back in my studio and fully recovered after what was quite a traumatic day with all of those insect bites. They made it quite difficult to concentrate on the painting process. And as soon as I made it back to my studio, I could immediately see some things with this that I wasn't totally happy with. Mainly that I didn't put light enough values back in the distance to try and create a bit more depth in the piece. So I've just been having a bit of a play this morning, seeing if I could add a few lighter values closer to what I wanted, but you know, it starts to become a bit overworked and you kind of lose the spontaneous feeling that you maybe had in the beginning. And I feel like I'm not really capturing the depth that I wanted. But that is exactly what I want from this experience. It's not about going out and creating finished masterpieces. I'm just aiming to create something that's a little bit more spontaneous than my regular work. And then I think once I've done maybe 5 or 6 of these, maybe I will choose the strongest one to work up into a bigger painting here in my studio. And at that point, I feel like this experience that I've had on location will really be useful, as I will have learned so much from each one of these. But I'm already planning my next trip outside. I'm really enjoying this despite the challenges, and thanks to all of you who commented on my first plein air video. You've really encouraged me not only to keep going at this, but to keep sharing the experience with you. So let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this one. Also, perhaps you have some tips for dealing with clags or horseflies, as they're also known. I would gladly hear those. But thanks so much for watching. Please do remember to hit subscribe, and until next time, happy pasteling.